Every family keeps old photo albums to remember the people they love. Mine hid a secret instead. In every single picture from my childhood, someone had been carefully cut out. For 28 years, my parents refused to explain why, until the day I found a letter in my grandmother's attic that began with 6 words. I could never forget. My name is Julia Carter, and for as long as I can remember, everyone told me I was an only child. I never had a reason to question it. My parents were ordinary people who lived quiet, lives in the same white farmhouse where I grew up. Every Sunday, we shared dinner at the old oak table. Every Christmas, we decorated the same tree that had stood in our living room since before I was born. And every birthday, my grandmother, Eleanor, would pull out the family's worn photo albums so we could laugh at old memories. As a little girl, I loved turning those faded pages, but there was one strange detail I noticed almost every time. In picture after picture, there was an empty space beside me. It wasn't damage caused by age. It wasn't faded ink. Someone had carefully used scissors to remove a person from every photograph. Sometimes an arm remained. Sometimes a hand rested on my shoulder, with no owner attached. In one picture, half of a smiling face was still visible before. The cut disappeared into the edge of the page. Whenever I asked my mother, she forced a smile. "They're just old damaged photos, sweetheart." My father always found a reason to leave the room before I could ask another question. Only Grandma Eleanor looked genuinely sad. She would quietly close the album and whisper, "Some memories are too heavy to carry." After years of hearing the same answers, I finally stopped asking. Until the week after Grandma's funeral, while cleaning her dusty attic, I discovered a small cedar chest hidden beneath an old blanket. Inside were faded letters, a silver locket, and one sealed envelope with my name written across the front. The handwriting wasn't my grandmother's. It simply read, "To Julia, please don't let them erase me forever." My heart began pounding. If I had truly been an only child, who was begging me to remember her? I broke the seal on the envelope, but the very first sentence made me realize my parents had been lying to me my entire life. With trembling hands, I unfolded the yellowed letter. The paper was fragile, its edges worn by time, as though it had been waiting years for someone to finally read it. The first line stole the air from my lungs. "Dear Julia, if you're reading this, it means they never told you I existed." I stared at the words, hoping they would somehow change. They didn't. The letter continued. "My name is Emily. I'm your older sister. By the time you find this, everyone will probably pretend I never lived. If that happens, promise me one thing. Don't hate them until you know the whole truth." I felt my knees weaken, forcing me to sit on the dusty attic floor. An older sister? It couldn't be possible. My parents had celebrated every birthday with me. They had told every neighbor they had one daughter. Every school form, every family gathering, every story from my childhood, they all said exactly the same thing. I was their only child. So why was someone claiming otherwise? The letter explained that Emily was 6 years older than me, and that she adored me from the day I was born. "You were too little to remember me," she wrote. "But every night, I used to sing until you fell asleep. You've always grabbed my finger before you closed your eyes." Tears blurred the page. Those memories felt strangely familiar, like fragments of a dream I could never fully remember. Near the bottom of the letter, Emily wrote something that made my heart race even faster. "The truth isn't inside this letter. It's inside the blue music box Grandpa made for me. If they haven't destroyed it, you'll find it where we used to hide during thunderstorms." A blue music box? I had never seen one. Before I could finish reading, I heard heavy footsteps climbing the attic stairs. My father. The moment he saw the letter in my hands, the color drained from his face. Without saying a word, he rushed toward me and tried to snatch it away. "Julia!" he shouted. "You were never supposed to find that." For the first time in my life, I looked straight into my father's terrified eyes, and I realized he wasn't afraid of the past. He was afraid of what I might discover next. When I demanded to know who Emily really was, my father's answer was only 4 words long, and it changed everything. My father's words echoed through the silent attic. She died a long time ago. That was it. 4 words. No explanation. No emotion. Just a sentence meant to end the conversation forever. I looked at him, still clutching Emily's letter against my chest. "If she died," I whispered, "then why did you cut her out of every family photo?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly lowered his hat and rubbed his forehead, as if carrying a weight that had never disappeared. "We were trying to protect you." Protect me? The words made no sense. You don't protect someone by pretending their sister never existed. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, my father sighed. "Your mother never wanted you to know." Before I could ask another question, my mother appeared at the attic door. The moment she saw the letter in my hands, her expression changed from confusion to panic. She rushed across the room and grabbed my father's arm. "You promised we'd never talk about this again." "I didn't," he answered quietly. "She found it." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "We buried this years ago." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You buried Emily, not the truth." She looked at me as though I had slapped her. Then she did something I never expected. She sat down on an old wooden trunk and began crying. "I loved her," she said through trembling breaths. "Every single day I loved her." Those words only confused me more. If you loved her, why erase her? Neither of them answered. Instead, my father slowly reached into his pocket and placed a small brass key in my hand. "I hoped I'd never have to give you this." I stared at the tiny key. "What does it open?" "The old storm cellar." My heart skipped. This storm cellar behind Grandma's farmhouse had been locked my entire life. As kids, my cousins and I were warned never to go near it. We were told it wasn't safe. But suddenly, I wasn't sure that had ever been the real reason. My father looked me directly in the eyes. "Emily hid something there before she disappeared." I froze. The room became painfully quiet. A moment ago, he had said she died. Now, he had just said she disappeared. Those 2 stories couldn't both be true. For the first time in my life, I realized my parents weren't hiding one secret. They were hiding many. I closed my fingers around the brass key. Whatever waited inside that storm cellar had been locked away for nearly 3 decades. And somehow, I knew it was waiting for me. The next morning, I unlocked the storm cellar, and the very first thing I saw made me realize Emily had been planning for this day all along. The next morning, I stood outside the old storm cellar behind my grandmother's farmhouse. The brass key felt cold in my hand. For as long as I could remember, that weathered wooden door had remained locked. Every summer, my cousins dared each other to touch it, but every adult in the family gave the same warning. Asterisk, stay away from the cellar. Asterisk. They claimed the stairs were rotten. The walls were unstable. Now I wasn't sure any of that had been true. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the key into the rusted lock. It turned with a loud click. The heavy door groaned open, releasing the smell of damp wood and old earth. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. I switched on my phone's flashlight and slowly climbed down. The cellar was much smaller than I expected. Old shelves lined the walls, covered with dusty jars, broken tools, and forgotten boxes. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then my light landed on a small blue music box, sitting alone on a wooden shelf. It looked untouched, almost as if someone had placed it there yesterday. My pulse quickened. This had to be the music box Emily mentioned. I carefully picked it up. There was no lock, no note attached, only tiny carved flowers decorating the lid. When I gently opened it, A soft melody filled the silent cellar. As the music played, I noticed something strange. The velvet lining inside the box wasn't glued down completely. Using my fingernail, I lifted one corner. Hidden beneath it was a folded photograph and a tiny cassette tape. The photograph showed two little girls sitting beneath the giant oak tree in my grandmother's backyard. One of them was me. I couldn't have been older than 2 years old. The older girl, wrapped around me with a protective smile, could only be Emily. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time in my life, I was looking at my sister's complete face. No scissors, no missing pieces, no lies. I turned the photograph over. Written neatly on the back were 7 words. If you're seeing this, they still lied. A chill ran through my entire body. Then I noticed another sentence beneath it. Asterisk. Listen to the tape before you believe anyone. Asterisk. I stared at the tiny cassette. Grandma had owned an old tape recorder. It was still sitting in the living room cabinet upstairs. Without wasting another second, I ran out of the cellar, gripping the music box tightly. I didn't care what my parents wanted anymore. If Emily had left behind her own voice, I was finally going to hear the truth. When I pressed play, Emily didn't begin by saying hello. She began by naming the one person she said destroyed our family forever. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I carried the blue music box into my grandmother's living room. The old cassette player was exactly where I remembered it, tucked inside the bottom cabinet beneath the television. Grandma never threw anything away. Even after all these years, the dusty machine still worked. I slid the tiny cassette inside and pressed play. For a second, there was only static. Then a young woman's voice filled the room. Soft, gentle, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. "Hi, Julia." Tears instantly filled my eyes. I had never heard my sister's voice before, yet somehow it felt like I had known it my entire life. If you're listening to this, then Grandma kept her promise. She paused, taking a slow breath. The first thing I need you to know is this. Mom and Dad loved us both. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. I froze. That wasn't what I expected. Emily wasn't angry. She wasn't blaming them. Then her voice became quieter. The person who destroyed our family wasn't Mom or Dad. My heart pounded harder. It was Uncle Robert. I stared at the cassette player. Uncle Robert? My father's older brother? The uncle who came to every Christmas dinner? The man who always brought me birthday presents? Emily continued. He wanted Grandpa's land more than he wanted this family. When Grandpa changed his will, Uncle Robert blamed Dad. He started telling lies, and one lie changed everything. I could barely breathe. One night, he accused me of stealing Grandpa's savings. I didn't, but nobody believed a 17-year-old girl over a respected adult. She let out a trembling sigh. I left because I thought my absence would stop the fighting. Before I could come home, there was a terrible car accident. The room fell silent, except for the faint sound of the tape spinning. Emily's next words broke my heart. After I died, Mom couldn't bear to look at my photographs. Dad couldn't bear to explain what happened to you when you were 2. Little to understand. Every picture disappeared because seeing my face reminded them of the biggest mistake our family ever made. Tears rolled down my cheeks. My parents hadn't erased Emily because they stopped loving her. They erased her because the pain was too much to survive. Then the tape crackled one final time. Julia, Uncle Robert is still hiding something. Inside Grandpa's desk is the one thing he prayed nobody would ever find. The recording ended. I slowly looked toward the hallway. Grandpa's old study. No one had opened that room since his funeral. And suddenly, I knew exactly where I had to go next. When I unlocked Grandpa's desk, I found a sealed envelope addressed to the entire family, and what was inside exposed a betrayal that had been hidden for nearly 30 years. I carefully unfolded Grandpa's letter The room was so quiet that I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking behind me. His handwriting was steady, just as I remembered. If you are reading this, then I am no longer here to tell you the truth myself. I spent years believing silence would protect this family. Instead, it destroyed us. A lump formed in my throat. Beneath the letter were several bank statements, copies of checks, and one signed confession. I picked it up first. It was written by Uncle Robert. More than 28 years earlier, he had admitted to taking Grandpa's savings after gambling away his own money. He confessed that he blamed Emily because he knew no one would suspect him. Grandpa had discovered the truth only weeks later. But before he could clear Emily's name, she had already left home. Then came the accident. Grandpa wrote that my parents had blamed themselves ever since. My mother believed she had failed to defend her daughter. My father believed he should have stood up to his brothers sooner. They carried that guilt for decades, until remembering Emily became too painful. I wiped away my tears. Emily hadn't been erased because she wasn't loved. She had been erased because everyone was trying to survive a heartbreak. They never learned how to face. That evening, I asked my parents and Uncle Robert to meet at Grandma's house. Nobody knew why. I placed Grandpa's confession on the dining table without saying a word. The color disappeared from Uncle Robert's face. He didn't deny it. Instead, he slowly sat down and whispered. I told myself I could live with the lie, but not a single day passed without thinking about Emily. My father stood up. For years, I thought he would explode with anger. Instead, he quietly said, "You didn't just steal money. You stole my daughter's life." No one spoke after that. Only my mother's quiet sobs filled the room.